Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, hello everyone. Welcome. We really appreciate your taking the time to be here this evening. I'm Heidi Hellenbach. I am the district coordinator for the Grand Rapids District Office of the Department of Environmental Quality. And I'm also the Grand Rapids District Supervisor for Air Quality. And we are pleased to be here this evening. As most of you know, there was a permit put out for public comment that was received by the Water Resources Division for a project proposed by Melching Incorporated. And that is why we are here tonight. But we noticed in a lot of the comments that came for that permit that there seemed to be a lot of questions that maybe weren't related directly to the permit. So we thought it might be helpful to have a question and answer session to try and get information out to you. Now, we don't have all the answers, but we will do our best to share the information that we do have with you. And this is going to be an informal question and answer session from 6 to 7. And then starting at 7, we'll try to break a little bit before 7 so we can set up. But starting at 7, we'll have the public hearing. And during the public hearing, there's not an opportunity to ask questions, but you can state your comments regarding the permit application on the record. And the Water Resources Division will run that hearing. So we'll start that at 7. If you still have questions after that, if we don't have time to get through everything, we'd be willing to stay and answer more questions after the hearing. So we did hand out a question and answer sheet to try and respond to some of the comments we received. So hopefully that will help some of you. Probably a lot more questions beyond that, but we thought it was a good start. So please refer to that. Hopefully everyone got it. It looks like this. And I think we have a few more out in the hall. So if you have one, raise your hand and we can get one for you. Everyone all set on that? Okay. Just to make sure this runs all smoothly, we're going to need your help tonight. There are a lot of you here, and we want to be able to have everyone be able to ask their questions. So we're going to ask that you limit your questions in the time, short time period, so we can go through them quickly. And if I think you're kind of going a little over 3 minutes, I will probably let you know that very politely. But so if you could then let us answer your question, and then we'll move on to the next person. That would be really helpful. Yes.
What are the known contaminants on the former?
Oh, you're ready to start right now. I just want to introduce our staff here first, okay? And then we'll get to the questions. Appreciate your eagerness. And we do know everyone is very passionate and concerned about this. We appreciate that fact, so we will work with you and get you the answers. So thank you for starting us off. We will get you 1 second. First, let me introduce the DEQ staff we have here tonight. And we have David O'Donnell, who is the district supervisor for the Remediation and Redevelopment Division. Just changed their name today. So we have Heather Hawkins. She is also with the Remediation and Redevelopment Division, and she is responsible for a lot of sites here in Muskegon County. So Heather's the one on the spot. We also have Jennifer Dixon. She is with the Air Quality Division, and she's also responsible for Muskegon County in terms of air quality issues. We have Nancy Kinkunen. She is with the Water Resources Division, and she's actually the permit writer on this Melching permit, and will be taking your testimony today. And last but not least, we have Luis Saldivia. He is the district supervisor for Water Resources Division. So he's also here to help answer questions. We also have Ann Couture here. She is the acting, you want to stand up, division chief for the Remediation and Redevelopment Districts. A lot of you probably have met Ann or seen some of her comments. And Mike Worm, he's hiding in the back. So he's handing out the question and answers. But Mike Worm is here from the Water Resources Division as well. I want to introduce Representative Marcia Wright. Thank you for coming, and appreciate your presence here. Any other elected officials who want to be introduced? No? Yes.
Well, British Carl by saying.
Thank you for being here. Yes.
Byron Turnquist, City Commissioner.
Excellent. Yes.
Leah Markowski, City Commissioner.
Willie German, City Commissioner.
Great. Well, thank you guys for being here. That's really helpful. Okay, well with that, I think you may get the first question.
Well, hey, thanks. Really appreciate it. What are the known contaminants on the former SETI site and where are they located?
I'm going to turn that to
Yeah.
you.
Tell me if you can't hear me. I'm not used to speaking into a little mic like this. What we know, there were some historic releases that in the early 2000s, that SAFE had some pipeline breaks. There are sodium sulfate. We've got some arsenic, selenium, silver. There's some manganese. And mercury in the groundwater in the central portion of the site, meaning kind of back where the buildings are. Since that point in time, Melching has put in some monitoring wells along the shoreline, and we have not seen those contaminants criteria in those wells.
You seem, thanks for answering. You seem to be going by memory, and I'm going to be going by memory now to remember what you said. Is there a place that we could look at this for verification?
Yes, and that would be in our files at the office building. I can, let's see, we have what you can do is request we have an opportunity where we can put our files on CDs. And so then we can mail that out to you. If you're with a group, it'd be best probably if maybe one person did that, and then you guys could share that information. But that we would go to the DEQ-FOIA@michigan.gov. We request to see the file on CD.
Thank you.
And scrap metals, and the water continues to go down.
What we have here tonight for the permit application that we have in front of the department is for 2 platforms for loading and unloading, that sort of thing. If the company decides in the future to put together a dredging proposal, they will have to apply for a permit with the DEQ, Water Resources Division. We will put on a public notice more than likely, and then we'll have an opportunity to look at what the issues associated with that dredging project will be. Quantities, what's in the sediment that are going to be dredged, where will they have to be taken, that sort of thing. So we are not contemplating that tonight, but that's certainly something that the company might want to petition the department to do.
So they'd have to start over.
Yes, with a new application, permit, that sort of thing.
Yes.
I want to also add to the question that Hannah had.
Okay.
Back to Heather. So does that mean that in the tunnels, these minerals aren't found, but does that mean that it's still in the surrounding land?
What I have is some,
Everybody over here cannot hear. Is it
Okay.
possible to repeat the question?
sure, I'll try my best. There were some concerns that there's tunnels and that some contaminants may be in those tunnels.
Or no, I'm saying you said that it's pretty much clear in the tunnels, but outside the surrounding area.
Okay, and that would be,
wells,
yeah,
sorry.
there's been some wells installed along the shoreline, and those wells, we haven't seen the contaminants in those wells.
But is it on the outside of the?
It's, what we're seeing is it being inside where the buildings are,
Oh,
where the buildings were.
okay. So underneath the ground.
Right, in the groundwater, yes.
Okay, you all set? Yes.
Those of us who grew up on Muskegon Lake have seen a lot of pollution that came from the mill originally when the log booms were there and whatnot. That had to go somewhere. And most pollution ends up on the bottom. Has anybody taken any well drillings or any core samples from outside the shoreline? It can't just disappear.
Right, you're talking about in the lake itself?
Yes.
I'm not aware of any. I believe that's kind of handled, there's a group in Lansing that they do some sediment samples. There may have been some historic samples collected in the lake.
It's not part of the DEQ?
Yes, it is part of the DEQ. I'm just saying that there's a section in Lansing that deals with sediments contamination. You might have, do we have some of that in our office? The file maybe, instead of having that information?
Well, what we have is that there have been a number of projects on Muskegon Lake over the years.
Since 1800.
Each project, dredging or the capping or whatever project is being put together to try to address some of those historical contaminant issues. Significant amount of sediment sampling takes place. I don't have in front of me, I don't recollect if in front of the mulching property a significant amount of sediment sampling has taken place, either by the DEQ or by the EPA or by anyone else.
Do you know if any has taken place, either historically or certainly more currently?
I don't have that information, ma'am. I think I recollect, because this is not part of this process that we're doing here tonight, but I'm not sure if the DEQ or sediment group sampling in Lansing did any sampling, but I thought that there was an effort, some funds from the EPA to do some strategic sampling throughout the area. That is what I have a recollection.
I think during, my co-worker that I work with in Water Resources Division in the district is Tom Berdinsky. And I know that, I think there might have been some samples collected during the whole area of concern designation, that there may be some.
I'm very confused because it's not your fault. I thought when you guys were monitoring this property to looking towards a solution to this request, that your job was to find pollution and what it would be disturbing it and releasing it, re-releasing it, whatever. And now I'm getting this, well, maybe, I don't know, years ago.
Yeah.
Has anything been done?
Okay, let's just get to that real quick. We have we have the 7 o'clock public hearing tonight.
Okay,
It's for the platform. No dredging is proposed.
Aren't they going out in the lake?
No,
They're not going out in the
they're
lake?
not going down the lake. We have, let me finish.
not according to your report.
The 2 docking platforms, that's where I imagine the shipping will be coming in and out. There's no dredging involved with that,
But there'll be pilings put down.
yes. But there's no, in a true sense, there's no requirement to do any sampling for that part of the project.
As we've been told by our city commissioners and city planners, that the DEQ is really all over that and responsible and is taking action in that direction. And I think that is what we are being told by our officials is being done. And so that's what I think the question is.
So,
Yeah.
may I speak to your question then? We have, to date, there has been some phased investigations going on the property. We're not going to be doing a large investigation because frankly it's too dangerous for the people doing the investigation. There's a lot of big equipment rolling around out there. And it's a 120-acre piece of property. These investigations take time. We will do the investigation in phases over time because there is a variety of activities that went on that property over 100+ years. So, speaking to your specific question about contamination in the deep sediments, because that is deep out there. Off of the Savvy property, it's probably the deepest part of the lake. We may get indications that we need to do investigations out there. Right now, we are up on the property. We are starting where we know the contamination is, and when I say we, I actually mean Melching is doing that because the state is not doing any investigation. We're overseeing the investigation. And we're overseeing the investigation that Melching's going to be doing, and we're going to be in a dialogue with Melching to make sure that all the concerns at the end of the day are taken care of. But it's not going to happen next week or next month or even next year. This is a several-year project.
Can the citizens initiate action on part of EPA? Because I understand they've been involved in sediment sampling. And could we ask them to do that on behalf of our concerns?
The EPA has, in the most recent project that I've worked on, they've actually let the state continue with the oversight of the project because they have a lot of things on their plate too. And at this point, I don't see a reason why the EQ can't do the oversight.
Okay. You first?
Heather, you mentioned that there were some significant spills since 2000, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, how long would we expect the water contamination to leach away from the area of the spills? Could it be that they just haven't reached the wells in the shore yet?
That is a possibility, yes.
Okay, the second question, do you have any idea what the measurement of the contamination is? I don't know if you do that in parts per million or whatever.
Yeah. For some of the metals like sodium, that's usually measured in what we call parts per billion. I'm sorry, parts per million. And then when we get to the metals, we look at parts per billion. So that's three steps kind of down. Micrograms per liter.
Okay, mercury.
Yeah, mercury is one that we take a look at, and that one is in what's called parts per trillion, or that's nanograms per liter.
Is there a report somewhere that we can get a copy of that spells out what the level of contamination is in that groundwater?
It is in one of the reports. I think that was like a 2005 report. Yes, you're welcome.
Well, this kind of goes along with what you're talking about. We understand that Melching is bringing in scrap metal from other locations outside of Muskegon, and we're wondering if there's any agency that is charged with monitoring for pollution from those metals that are brought in to the scrap yard.
The DEQ does not oversee scrapyard operations, and I can't think of any department that does. Anybody?
No, and our anticipation would be that the operations that they're doing, which involve coarse cutting of metals for shipment, is not going to lead to significant contamination. Of course, they still have obligations to be good housekeepers with that. But no, that is not regulated by the DEQ.
Does the Department of Transportation take care of that?
I doubt that.
The shipping industry? There's no oversight? So if the barge falls over and all this metal falls into our lake, nobody's there to know.
Well, that part, the Coast Guard, probably federal agency. Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for having this Q&A. In light of the fact that the testing that's being done is being done by Melching himself and only overseen by the DEQ rather than done by the DEQ, having been told that the DEQ doesn't have the funding, the staff, or the resources to do its own testing, and in light of the fact that the deed restrictions forbid Melching Inc. from testing in the dirty hotspots on the land, how are we to believe any of these test results? Why are we're not seeing the real stuff for testing where there is no contaminants or very little? He's barred from testing dirty spots, unless I'm misunderstanding that somehow.
I think there's two questions. One question is, how is it that the DEQ is able to provide oversight given what you've heard is limited resources? And the second question is with respect to
Hotspots.
we're testing the hotspots and the deed restrictions. The deed restrictions actually do not prohibit the testing on any part of the property, although it does require Melching to work with SAPI and to vet their work plans through. However, if the DEQ requests specific testing, Melching can do that. And so part of our oversight is going to be looking at those hotspots and whether or not they represent a threat and whether we think further testing needs to be done. Our oversight is not going to be just limited to, taking a table out of a report and looking at that. Heather and Matt Gamble, a very clever geologist that I have working for me, are part of the team that will be reviewing not only the data that comes in, but the quality control information that comes in with the data. Whenever you do environmental testing, there is reams of quality control data that comes in. That will help inform our ability to...
I don't have it with me, but I can get you a number. I don't have it with me right now, but I mean, I can.
They're in Greenfield.
They're based out of.
Yeah, they have several assumed names.
Yeah.
Currently have four assumed names. It's called Lakeshore Aquatic Services, Lakeshore Environmental Engineering, Lakeshore Engineering and Consulting, Lakeshore Wetland Consulting, and we have four previous ones that were totally different in prior years. So how reliable are these people?
That's marketing. You don't want to just be one. You've got to do everything. That's just marketing. We've worked with Lakeshore for, I've been here for 22 years, and I think I've worked with them starting early on in my career. So they've been around for a while. We personally know most of the people who work there.
Okay. Have you tried? I do have a number here. 616-844-5050.
I gotta be good for smartphones.
Yeah, I don't have one.
Smarter than me. Yes, in the back.
Yes, do the same rules cover sampling on the Melching-owned property as they do on Muskegon Lake? Do the same rules of sampling apply?
Same rules of sampling for the two medias.
Yes.
Does that answer your question? Is that your okay? Yes.
It appears that the site for assembling and shipping the scrap metal was reduced to 2.2 acres or less, so that it would not require site plan approval by the Muskegon Planning Commission. How does this relate to Melching Inc.'s ability to proactively prevent pollution in the shipping process? And can the operations really be narrowed down that far to 2.2 acres without concentrating any contaminants imported from off-site, without creating a greater risk that there will be contaminated runoff into surface water?
Can't hear.
Can't hear you back here.
The question related...
Like bring this to
The question related to the reduction Melching can contain its operations to a certain size, and how that related to environmental contamination and Melching's ability to contain any contaminants that are associated with the metals. And I think, as I said earlier, an earlier question, we do not do oversight of their process. They have obligations to make sure that they don't contaminate the property. Of course, with us doing oversight of an eventual much larger investigation, it would be in their best interests not to do any further contamination of the property based on their processes.
Okay, in the back?
Yes, but considering that there's been no baseline environmental assessment of this property, how would anyone be able to know whether there have been additional contaminants added to the property via this scrap metal operation? We don't know what's there now. We don't have a baseline. Who's to say that X contaminant originated from SAPI versus from Melching's operations at any point down the road? Everyone's flying blind here.
That's an excellent question. They won't be able to distinguish, in many cases, the difference between contamination from their operations or from SAPI's, but that's irrelevant to the fact that Melching has responsibility for everything. So if they find contamination that exceeds the criteria in our state environmental code, they're going to be responsible for offering a remediation plan to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
To that question, how has SAPI been held accountable for the pollution that they've caused?
We have sent notice letters to SAPI, and Melching has responded on behalf of SAPI.
Have you accepted that?
As long as they keep doing the work.
How do we know Melching does it right?
Well, that speaks back to the question about oversight.
David's on the case, so. Yes.
Thanks. What criteria are you using to create a plan for cleanup?
The criteria used in any remedial plan in the state is informed by, first, the person proposing the plan, and second, the zoning of the property. That is what the criteria will be based on. So that is the final cleanup criteria. It's premature to say whether they're going to use one or the other, although I think it's pretty safe in this case to say that they're going to be using the non-residential criteria as the basis for their cleanup.
Area residents have collected particulates that have collected on like their picnic tables and their automobiles and other parts of their homes in the immediate area. My husband was showered riding his bike through the area. People have reported having, their cars showered with particulates coming off the site during the demolition. And I live across the bay from the paper mill, and on certain nights I have to close all the windows because I can't breathe and I'll have a constricted throat and nasal congestion and coughing. And I know there's a distinct difference because I have a place in the UP and I can really breathe well up there. And I know there are a lot of contaminated sites and a lot of places that do have airborne contaminants coming out of their smokestacks. But what are the standards and criteria by which acceptable levels of airborne contaminants in particular are measured? And who's responsible for collecting those samples? In light of the fact that in Muskegon we have high rates of asthma, respiratory illness, cancer, diabetes, and renal failure, all which have associations with dirty air.
Well, number one, if you do see dust like that you think is from the Melching operations that are ongoing right now, if there
Call you at 4 in the morning.
Pardon?
Call you at 4 in the morning.
You can do that. We do have a number that you can call. If you really think it's an emergency, a pollution emergency, please call the PEAS line. That's for emergencies only. Like if you happen to be outside and I don't know what it could be that would be associated with them. They're typically not working at night for ones if they're not running the water machine, the dust destroyer, like they're required to. We may be seeing excess dust in the area. Please call me if you do see it. Now this would be dust that would be leaving their facility and impacting your property, your use of the sidewalk, anything like that. As far as the levels go, because of the operations they're doing there right now, it really is kind of if we're seeing something, then they shouldn't be doing it. Then they need to be taking extra care. They need to be adding more water. They need to be doing it in a different way that's minimizing that dust and smoke that's getting in the air. I have made a couple visits to the site. I've made several visits around the area. I'm in Muskegon once or twice a week. So I always try to come by here and just see what they're doing. I am watching them as much as I humanly can. But if you see an issue, you need to call me, because if you don't, then I don't know what's going on. Okay?
Your number is around.
Yeah, our office number is, there's a question about that, what to do, and our office number is in here. And you can ask for Jennifer, if she's not there, you can ask for me, and we will get someone out to the site.
And they are well aware of what they are allowed to do. So if you do think it's an issue, please let me know. And I mean, this doesn't necessarily apply to mulching, but we have had some where people have thought it was mulching and it wasn't. And I can usually identify where it's coming from, and I do try to take care of that to the best of my ability. So if your best recourse is call the office. If it's an emergency, call the police line.
And then do you want samplings of the particular, you already know what it is?
If I'm doing my due diligence and I really feel like there is an issue of contaminants coming off-site like that, I will take samples. I'll put out dishes, and that we do have some stuff that we can do. We are limited a little bit with the sampling that we can do in our office, from our office. But I will, if it becomes an issue of that leaving the site and we can identify that, then I will take samples.
But you haven't so far.
I have not so far, because I haven't gotten enough complaints. I'm not telling you to complain for no reason.
Just to follow up on the dust contamination, I'm about 2 miles from there. When the wind is blowing from the east in the past, when the paper mill, we used to see a lot of black spots on the boat. Different now, all of a sudden, this is just what I got off a 6-inch space on my boat.
Okay.
That said Pigeon Key Marina. I've also got a small dinghy, and it's just really dark.
Call me when it gets on there again, and I'll come out and look at it for you, for sure.
And I think the dust situation, we've got so many marinas here, it's gonna be a real detriment. And he may be spraying or they're tearing it apart. There's an awful lot of dustable stuff as they drive those
That's
trucks.
true, and they do have, I have required mulching to, and it's not a written plan, but they do have a dust management plan, so they do water the roadways. When I go out there, I tell them, this is not wet enough, this is not wet enough, this is not wet enough, you need to be adding water, you need to be doing it more frequently, and that is one of the things that when I go out there, I really look at. Because I don't want to drive by and see them on their bulldozers with dust going behind them. And like I said, I can't live there. I'm not there 24/7, but when I do see it, I do address it immediately with them.
So can you test his samples?
No, because I did not see where they came from.
And we have to maintain chain of custody, so, but we will, in the sample.
I'll still look at it, but I won't be able to, you know what I mean? It's just,
Yes.
Yes, hi. The impression I'm getting is that there is not, as you say, you can't live there. And we've heard a lot of maybes and I don't knows, and I understand that you might be understaffed and all those things. I appreciate all the work you are doing. However, the impression I'm getting is that the community really needs to be the watchdog that we thought organizations like this were. That was your sole function, to my understanding. And if you don't have the staffing or funding or time or resources to watchdog it like the community needs, and the community needs to call constantly to let you know anything we see, it sounds like it's up to us. And you've already said the EPA's got other things they're handling. So would you say that's accurate?
Well,
I mean, for
you know,
concerned citizens?
it's good to hear from you because you are extra eyes and ears, but these staff do spend a lot of time out in Muskegon.
Sure, I understand that.
And RD is working very hard with mulching on the plan, the investigation, and so, you know, there is a lot of effort being undertaken by DEQ, but yes, extra eyes and ears are always good, so.
Okay, and in response to the chain of command, unless I misunderstood something, or not
Chain of custody.
Custody, thank you. Did I misunderstand that there is no chain of custody with the mulching test, but there is from a citizen?
Yes, there is chain of custody
There is.
required.
You overseen the
Absolutely.
test, I mean,
Yes.
the actual sample being taken?
They are on site.
Okay, thank you.
Not all the time,
Okay.
but the consultant is required to do chain of
I
custody.
see, thank you for the clarification.
Yes.
Yeah, I have 3 questions all regarding investigating contaminants pollution. So you mentioned the monitoring wells that are installed in the hot spots. So my first question is, sounds like the monitoring wells are along the lake shore. Or is there anything in between that and the hot spots to see if anything's moving? My second question is, you talked about investigating under phases. Can you talk a little bit about what your plan is for those phases, those plans, and what kind of a timeline you might think that those investigations would come under? How long was it going to take to really investigate the site? And then thirdly, with all the problems you're talking about on the site, how will you investigate if it's too dangerous to get to the site? So do you have something to address some of those issues so you can get to those spots that might need investigation, that might be dangerous now?
I hope I have them all written down here. I might have to have you refresh me.
Okay.
But for the monitoring wells, we wanted to know what was potentially impacting the lake. That was a huge concern that I know you have and that we have as well. So their first step was to put wells in along the shoreline. It doesn't mean that's going to be the only wells we see out there. We're going to be seeing some inland more. There's going to be investigations in those hotspot areas. So I expect to see some contamination inland. We may not see it currently in those outer rim wells, but we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be, there's not just going to be wells along the shoreline. We're going to be seeing some. There are some interior, but it's kind of bracketing the building area where they've got their heavy equipment. First phase was to put those wells in along the shoreline. Then we'll do some backtracking. If there's a particular parcel on the property that there's some interest in, I think that's when we go over to that particular parcel and we sample it, the soils, we sample the groundwater. We get those results from mulching so that we know, what's in those particular areas. So that's also somewhat of a phased approach as well. Timeline that you had mentioned, if those parcels aren't being necessarily sold off right away, we want to know what's going on more in the hot spots. Let's take a look at what's there. And so that will be our phased approach as well. The timeline, it's hard to say exactly. I can't say like, well, in December of this year, I should be getting a report from them regarding the wells interiorly. Part of it is that we get the results. It takes a little bit of time to review them, making sure that the QA/QC is appropriate, which is the quality assurance, quality control. And at that point, when we get a chance to look at those results, we can then see, okay, well, this area on this edge looks to be a little bit hotter. Let's move it over there. So it can take a couple of months. I know that I've spent, it must be 15, 16 years up in White Lake with the tannery site. It does take time, but if you want the job done right and you want it done well, so you know what you've got, it's the time that it does take.
My last question,
I'm sorry.
My last question was in terms of, you have some dangerous areas. How will you address getting to those dangerous areas? Do you have a plan for that?
Again, it's Melchin's program, and what I would suggest is, as they get the metal out of the buildings, down on the ground, and ship it off the site, those areas will become open for investigation. So as soon as they can get metal off the site, which is in their best interest, from a business standpoint, they're going to leave that site open for investigations.
So, kind of a related question. What would cause an investigation of the sediments to kick in? I mean, what would make you suspicious of that, and what would the, I guess I'm going to use the term, bureaucratic processes be?
If we start seeing things in those monitoring wells along GSI, that raises questions about what's going out into the lake.
But
And that-
historically, I mean, you know, we wouldn't have had monitoring wells, you know,
Right.
at the time that one suspects that a great deal of pollution was happening.
Well, right now, there's, certain wells along the area where the central operations had occurred. There's other wells that we're gonna need to see along other portions of the site, along what we call the GSI. I might use that acronym, and I'm sorry, that's groundwater surface water interface. So that's where the groundwater and the surface water tend to meet. That's what we were interested in. So there's gonna need to be some wells other than just where we have them currently along the shoreline.
Okay, so brief follow-up question. Let's just suppose that citizens were able to engage someone to do their own testing of the sediments, and that indicated that there was something to look at there. How would that work?
We would have to draw the nexus between the contamination and the operations of the property, which may be easy, which may not be easy. But given the interest, I think, it's probably something that we're going to have to do is go back and take a look at the data we have, and maybe suggest to our Water Resources Division when they're going to be doing some testing that this might be a good place to do that testing in the future, because we do have periodic requests from the Water Resources Division to my division for areas of concern as far as testing. So if we don't find the data, we can probably try to get it. I think we could get it.
Yes. Regarding GSI or the groundwater support interface, do you feel that that area is adequately mapped so that you are aware of where all of the groundwater is going?
Right now, we've got wells that are screened shallow in the shallow portion of the aquifer, and we've got a couple that are intermediate, but for the most part, we've seen just some shallow wells. We've requested some deeper wells out there, and just recently, like last Friday, I've gotten a report they have installed some additional wells out there. I haven't had an opportunity to take a look at it yet. I want to make sure I do a good data review and everything, but there will be not only just shallow wells along there, but because we have this kind of sloping material, I mean the shore seems to slope and it's a deeper lake bottom, we're going to need to see intervals sampled out here.
Not necessarily in regards to the samples, as to whether or not that's being sampled, but do you actually know where the groundwater travels from the SAPI site outwards?
Yes, we can determine that by water level elevations, groundwater elevations. And it is flowing to those. Yes.
There is a ballot proposal on the ballot, on the November ballot to change the zoning of this property. If that zoning change is approved, would that necessarily change the level of cleanliness that would be applied to the property?
Not necessarily, no.
Yes. You was stated that your environmental quality doesn't have any baselines for any of the current pollutions. Well, how could you not have baselines? There hasn't been any testing so far?
We have some results from 2005 out there.
In other words, you do have.
Yes, we have some results.
So there are
yes.
baselines. In other words, if the mercury suddenly spiked, you would realize that it wasn't there before it came
Yeah,
from
right.
somewhere.
Yes, in that.
So you do have some kind of
Yes, we
data.
do have, yes, there is some data. That was in 2005 report. There's some.
Because I'm sure that the taxpayers.
This gentleman here in the neighborhood is about the dust. I live across the street from the mill on Lakeshore Drive, and there is a lot of that. I don't know what you call it. It's kind of like milky, grayish dust or whatever it is. But anyway, it's all over the lawn furniture. It's all over my car. I'm sure it's all over my house. The lawn furniture.
I'll come over.
And I've had, somebody mentioned, you know, they only work during the daytime. It doesn't really matter. The wind blows at night too.
Right, I
And it blows
understand.
both ways, and we get it pretty bad. I've been in there for 40-some years, and people say, well, you should have bought that house. Well, this time I was here before melting was. You know, why don't they take us into consideration as well? Because they say, I had a talk with a couple of guys that said they worked for them, and I got a card from them, just so I can call them, because I didn't know what to call you, but I would be calling you.
Okay, come get my card
But
afterwards.
they're doing, what they're doing is so hard. The pictures on my wall in my house go like this, the coffee goes like this, walking around in my pot. And the house itself, and I went over one, they could break my foundation. It's actually broke a few foundations in the past. And I don't know what these guys are doing, but I went over and asked them, I said, how about your house? Oh, he says, it's affecting my house. See, that's kind of like the fox watching the hen house, when they're doing all of the investigation and nobody else is in there to back it up.
We don't regulate noise or vibrations, like, you know, maybe the city has some ordinance, but definitely the dust, we would be
Well,
interested
but
in.
we still, there's
Yep.
noise residents out there, they, you know, comment that thing.
But call me, and I will come out and look at it, for sure.
And you're welcome to come on.
Is there a time frame on when demolitions and stuff will be?
He had said 2 years, they thought. I mean, it's the process, it's a lot. The problem is with it that I see, or from what I understand, there's so much sorting that has to be done. The sorting takes a really long time, the sorting and the cutting. So in order for them to get the pieces of the building out of there, it is gonna take them a lot of time. I mean, I'm sure you've seen, they can pick up one piece at a time with each front end loader, one piece, and they cut it in one piece. And so, such a huge property and so many buildings that it is gonna take a long time. Now, I heard 1 to 2 years. When I look at that, I think closer to 2 years. That is not my professional opinion, that's just my personal opinion. Based on how much they have to do, previous experience with demolition sites and what they're trying to achieve, because they are trying to recycle as much as they possibly can from the site. Whether it's cementitious material, metal, aluminum, steel, everything's being meticulously separated.
So 2 years from today, kind of, or are
I
we?
think
are we
from
3
when
months
they
into it?
started. No, I think from when they
So we're a
started.
few months into that on the good side of it.
I think you're gonna see a lot come down, and then it's gonna kind of seem like it's sitting there for a long time as they sort through everything.
Okay, we'll take one more question. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to ask one yet?
Back there in the back, you haven't asked one yet, in the purple?
In this article, it says that you also consider the public's right to access to the lake and recreational boating. My question is, in the wintertime, is there going to be a cutter coming in to cut the ice so they can get their barges or whatever they take to their dock? And how will that affect the ice fishing? You know?
That is not something that the DEQ would oversee at all, so we would not.
And like who to pay for that, and it impinges on our recreational boating industry.
Unfortunately, not an issue.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up right now for the questions. Thank you so much for your patience and your listening and your good questions. If you want, if you do have questions afterwards, we could resume. You might be tired after that, but and there will be future meetings too. This is not, you know, a one-time appearance by DEQ. We will have meetings in the future. So thank you, and we'll set up for the public hearing portion of the meeting.